Hey guys, so this video will be marked as my first ever tutorial video about some 3D stuff in Blender. So in this video I'm gonna show you how to create the invincible egg. So first up we have to open Blender. In this I am using the version 2.83, which is the latest. It is a free open source software. Okay, so before we start, this is an intermediate tutorial, assuming that you have some basic knowledge of Blender, how to navigate through it and use some hotkeys in Blender. So I'm not going to go through all the basic stuff. I'm just here for the tutorial. So if you have any doubt or you're just new to Blender, I highly recommend that you visit the Blender Guru channel and make a donut. Okay, so opening Blender, we have our basic layout here, and along with it our default cube, so we don't want that, and I'm going to go ahead and delete the default cube here. And by pressing Shift A, I'm going to add a UV sphere, and we are going to model the egg. I'm just going to catch the keys so you can see which keys I'm pressing. So I'm gonna press tab and go into edit mode and select the bottommost vertex of the UV sphere, and notice that I have turned my proportional editing on so that I can grab some of the vertex along with that. So I can increase or decrease the radius by scrolling the mouse wheel, and yeah, just grab along the Z axis, and there we have our egg. I'm gonna shade smooth that and maybe add a subdivision surface modifier so it looks shiny and just smooth. So I'm gonna name this object as egg. Now I'm just gonna hide that, and we're gonna make our hammer. So for that I'm gonna press Shift A, add in a cylinder, and then rotate that 90 degree around Y axis. Scale it in the X axis. Add a loop cut by pressing Ctrl R and scrolling the mouse wheel to increase or decrease the number of loop cuts. And I'm gonna add a number of loop cuts between those two loop cuts, and this is the result. So for the circular projection in the center, I'm going to just select a group of faces there, and I'm going to use my loop tools and select circle, so that will form a little circle. I'm just going to scale it in the x-axis and scale it in the z-axis, and I'll be projecting those faces by grabbing it in the y-axis, and I'm just going to scale it up a little bit. So that's one side done. Just going to do the same in the other side as well. And for the bottom handle part, I'm just going to select some faces and do the exact same thing and make a circle there. And I'm going to flatten those faces by using loop tools, and I'm going to extrude by clicking E. So that will be the handle there. Extrude, cancel that, and click scale, and again extrude, so that will form our grip. And I'm just going to scale it up a little bit more. So there is a basic model of our hammer. To model our grip, I'm gonna add a few loop cuts in there, and select the alternate faces and just extrude and scale, and make sure you scale in the normals by clicking Alt S. So that's it, that's our grip done. Okay, I'm just gonna select that face right there and just gonna grab it in the x-axis, scale it up a little bit, maybe add a loop cut there. Just gonna scale it up, select the entire loop, and we can slide the loop by pressing G twice. Another loop cut right there. Select that face and scale it in. So that will be our hammer. And add in a subsurf modifier. Increase your viewport value to 3, and this will be the resulting look after we add the subdivision surface modifier. And notice how the edges are not looking sharper and not looking like a hammer. So what I'll do is just add a few loop cuts near those edges to define those edges more clearly and make it a little bit sharper. So I'm adding loop cuts in the edges where I want it to be sharper, and in order to give the sharper look. And notice how the subdivision surface has made my grip very smooth. I just don't want that. I want my grip to be more defining. So I'm adding loops and sliding it near every defining edge in my grip. Now a 3D model of the hammer is done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the head of the hammer, the middle region and the grip into different parts. Press Alt Z or Alt Z to go to X-ray mode. And I just selected the head part and just separated it by pressing P. I'm going to name it as head, and we're going to select the other region, the middle part, and I've separated that. I'm just gonna name it as metal tail. And then for the grip, I'm just going to name it as grip. So by this we have separated the head, the metal tail and the grip. So what I'm going to do is parent the head to the metal tail so that it follows the tail. So I'm just going to press the head first and select the parent, which is a metal tailpipe, and just pressing Ctrl P, I'm just going to parent the head to the metal tail. And I'm just going to do the same with the grip here. You can see when I try to move the grip, the entire hammer moves along with it, but when I try to move the head moves individually. And I'm just going to scale it up a little bit so it can match the size of the egg. Just going to position that. So if you notice the origin, it is at the head of the hammer, so when I try to rotate it, it just rotates around the head. What I'm going to do is just place the cursor at the bottom of the grip and then snap the origin to the cursor. So the origin is right now at the bottom of the grip. So if I try to rotate it now, it just rotates around the origin, which is now at the grip, and that is exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to add in a plane. which will be our table material, and scale it up a little bit, drag it down so that the egg is just on the plane. So rotate an egg a little bit. Adjust the plane so that there won't be any clipping between the egg and the plane. Now let's head over to the shading tab to add the materials for the hammer, the egg and the plane. And I just added a new material for the hammerhead, and I'm just going to add an image texture. So I already went ahead and downloaded some metal textures from texturehaven.com, and it would become really handy if you duplicate your image texture a couple of times, because you're gonna need it more than once. So I'm going to take the metal 05 color and I'm just going to plug that into the base color. And then select the next texture node and add in the metal texture. Open that and plug into the metallic tab. I'll take the roughness map and plug that into the roughness. Okay, we can see the changes in the head. And I'll take the displacement. I'll add in a displacement node. Connect the color to the height and displacement to the normal. I'll provide the link to texturehaven.com in my description below, so you can download your texture according to your choice and model. So when I switch into cycles render, the viewport, the materials and the head doesn't seem to fit. It just appears black, so that is not what I want. I'm going to change my light source from point to sun and decrease the strength to 5. So we are going to adjust the position and direction of the light so that the model is well lit and the shadows are casted perfectly. So what I did was I add in a texture coordinate and a texture mapping, and I connected the vector of the mapping to the vector of the image texture node, which contains our metallic surface. So in the mapping node, in the scale section, I'm going to increase the value of the scale up to 187. I highly recommend not to copy my value, because this value will depend upon your model, which may be very different from mine in terms of size and scale. So you just have to play with that and find a value that is suitable for your model. In the displacement node, I'm just going to tap into world space. Mid level is 0 and scale is 4.40. You just have to play with the values, because these textures are going to depend upon your model and the size of it. I'm just going to select it by pressing A. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm just going to paste that into the material of the metal tail. So that's it. So for the grip, that is pretty easy. I'll just add in a new material and take the base color to almost black, not too black, almost black, and increase the roughness to a 0.855 and reduce specular to 0, maybe a 0.055, and a metallic to 0.132. So for the egg, I'm just going to add in a new material, pump up the roughness to 0.895 and the specular to around 0.445, and add a bit of metallics for that extra shine. And we have to make the material for the plane, so I'm just going to add in a new material, add in an image texture. We have to duplicate that for a couple of times. So I'm just going to navigate to the folder where I have saved my wooden texture, and that too which I have downloaded from texturehaven.com. So the wood 29 will be my texture for this plane, so that will be my image for the color node. So I'm going to add an image for my roughness map as well, and for the displacement too. I'm just going to connect the color to the color, the roughness to the roughness, and I'm just going to move that a little bit and add the displacement node. So I'm just going to connect the color to the height and the displacement to the normal. So I'm just going to reduce the scale to 0.4, the displacement node, and to achieve realism and ambient lighting, I'm going to add an HDRI as an environment texture. So navigate to the world tab, choose color, add environment texture. The whole scene is going to go magenta. In the environment texture tab, click open image and navigate to the folder where you have saved your HDRI. Note that I have downloaded these HDRIs from hdrihaven.com. I will add a link in the description for that too below. So I have chosen an interior scene as my HDRI image. Turn the egg a little bit. You don't have to necessarily copy those settings exactly as mine, because it is more like an independent thing. This is where the creativity comes from. So you can place or rotate those, you can place or rotate that egg however you like it. So now for the animation, I'm just going to rotate this hammer a little bit, add in a keyframe of location and rotation. And I'm just going to move it to around 80, so I just want it in slow motion. So I'm going to jump into 80 and rotate the hammer so that it just touches the egg like that. That's perfect. So I'm just going to add a keyframe there of location and rotation. So if I'm going to play, it just goes like this and just touches the egg. So right now I'm just adjusting the camera. Going to select the GPU compute so that the render becomes a little bit more faster. So I'm just going to render that frame. Here it is. So now what we're going to do is we are going to break the hammer. So for that you have to enable the self fracture add-on, and which can be done by going to edit, preferences, and add-on, and you have to select and you have to search for self fracture and just enable it. So you have to select which part you have to break, and in my case it's the head. So for the hammer cracking part, what I did was selected the annotation pencil and tap N so you can get the toolbar, and just select the placement from 3D cursor to surface, and I'm just going to draw some lines on the surface which represent the cracks that has to be formed. So I just want the crack to be at the point of contact with the egg, so drawing more lines there. You don't have to be so precise in drawing the representation of the cracks, because the self fracture does a good job, and you can play with that and draw anything you like. Go to object, self fracture, select annotation pencil. You can select your own particles, but for this I'm just gonna go with annotation pencil. On particles just works fine, and I'm going to pump the source limit to 150, set the collection to cell, and press OK. So you can see the cracking is happening. Okay, so that's done, and you have some extruding projections which you can delete. So just going to delete the lines by taking the annotation eraser. So now I'm going to add some physics to the cracked materials. So what I'm going to do is select an individual cell and go into the physics menu, add a rigid body, and the type should be active, and it's going to select all the cells and go to object, rigid body, and copy from active. By doing that, the physics that we have just added to that individual cell has been copied from that cell to all the other remaining cells. So if you press play, the hammerhead is just going to fall. That is because the physics, the gravity works. So what I'm going to do is select the plane and add in a rigid body, and select the type as passive so that it doesn't move and the gravity doesn't affect on that. Do the same for the egg as well, so because we just want the hammer to hit the egg. So now if we press play, it is a bit slow to render. The hammer is going to react with the egg and the plane, and it's just gonna fall and break into pieces. So I just want the animation to be a little bit slow, so I'm just going to scene, rigid body world, settings, and crank down the speed down to 0.25, and select the split impulse. And you have to keep in mind to bake the animation, or else it wouldn't render. I'm just going to bake it for around 90 frames. So the baking process is going on. So if you bake that, the animation is going to be faster at 24 frames per second. So we just went ahead and baked it to frame 150. This will be the end result. Just going to set up the rendering scene pretty quick. So I have set my rendering to 150 frames at 24 frames per second, and the format is PNG, which is an image sequence. So I'm just going to go into compositing, and between the render layers and compositing node I'm just going to add a denoiser node so that there is less noise in the render. There. So that's that. So I'm just going to render that pretty quick. Okay, now that's done. And for the animation, what I did was I just rendered the frame 1 to 80 where the hammer would just contact the egg. This is my first render where you can see the animation till the hammer is hitting the egg. And for the second part, what I did was I just moved the entire keyframe to 0 so that the start of the frame at 0 it looks like this, and at the end it looks like this. The reason why I did this was because when the gravity comes into play, it's just a little bit harder to control when the hammer should fall. So you need the gravity, you just can't cancel the gravity. The gravity will start acting on the object as soon as we start the animation, so I have to put it at 0 frames. So that's why I had to split the animation into 2 parts. So in the post-processing, I'm just using After Effects for that. The After Effects, I'm just going to file, import multiple files, and just going to import my first part of the animation. Just select the first image and press import. I'm just going to add the second part of my animation and click OK. And I just made a composition and set the duration to 15 seconds. Press OK. I'm going to drag my first part of the animation into the composition. So I'm going to place my second part right after the first part. So the second part starts to play immediately after the first part. So if we just join the first and the second animation, we're just going to get the cool result like this. As I have said, this is my first ever tutorial video that I have done, and I'm sure that there are quite a lot of flaws in there, so you all have to excuse me this time. I'll be sure that I'll make it better the next time. And with that being said, the tutorial for the invincible egg here is done, and I hope you have learned some stuff. So if you're having any queries or doubt relating to this, you can contact me in my Instagram handle, which I will be providing in the description below. And I'll be posting more tutorials and cooler stuff in my channel, so be sure to subscribe to my channel, and thank you.